Before we begin this powerful journey across the dust-covered trails of the Old West, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, drop a like, and ring the bell so you never miss a story full of mystery, truth, and redemption. What you're about to hear isn't just a Western tale, it's a forgotten chapter of pain, purpose, and discovery. This is the story of a black rancher, a widow with secrets, and a grave that time tried to erase. A man with questions, a woman with a map, and a father whose bones were buried far from peace. So sit tight, take a deep breath, and prepare to ride into the past. His name was Cole Matthews. A man of few words, skin burned dark by the sun, eyes like coal, and silence as deep as canyon shadows. He ran a modest ranch near the Arizona border, quiet and remote, just the way he liked it. No neighbors, no visitors, no noise. Folks in town whispered about him, said he was hiding something. But the truth was, Cole wasn't hiding. He was waiting. Waiting for a sign, for a clue, for anything that would lead him to the father he never knew. All he had was a single name, and a hole in his soul where answers should have been. One morning, just after the roosters called out to the rising sun, a knock echoed on Cole's weather-worn door. It wasn't the sheriff. It wasn't a drifter. It was a woman, tall, wrapped in a black shawl, with silver streaks in her hair and a leather pouch hanging from her belt. "You don't know me," she said. "But I knew your father." Cole's heart didn't race. It stopped. She introduced herself as Mabel Carson, a widow from back east. Her voice was low and slow, like she was dragging a heavy truth across the dirt. Then she held out the pouch. Inside was a torn, faded map. Cole didn't speak. He stared at the map like it might vanish if he blinked. The lines were faint, the ink worn, but one thing was clear. There was a marked X deep in the hills west of Cactus Ridge. "Your father rode with my husband once," Mabel said. "He died out there. Nobody came for him. Nobody even knew where he fell. But I was there. I saw it." Cole clenched his jaw. He'd spent a lifetime with nothing but silence. No stories. No gravestone. Just the aching suspicion that his father had been erased from the world. Mabel didn't ask for payment. She didn't ask for thanks. She just said, "I'm old. And I'm tired of carrying secrets." Cole studied her for a moment longer, then nodded once. The journey would be long, the trails uncertain, but he had no choice now. This wasn't about curiosity. It was about blood. About finally knowing. They left before noon, riding west under a cruel sun that scorched the earth and dried up lies. Mabel's horse was slow, but steady. She rode like someone who'd buried more than one memory in the dirt. The first few miles were silent. Cole didn't press her, and Mabel didn't volunteer much. She just muttered things like, "He was kind," or "He never should have gone." The trail twisted through dry riverbeds and rocky passes. Crows followed from above, and the wind howled like ghosts calling out. Cole kept his eyes sharp and his mind sharper. He couldn't trust easily, not after a life of betrayal. But something in Mabel's face, in her silence, felt too heavy to be false. She wasn't just leading him to a grave. She was leading him to the truth. They camped that night under a cliff shaped like a horse's head. Cole made a small fire, and Mabel sat cross-legged beside it. "He used to hum when he rode," she said, staring into the flames. "Had a song for every storm. That's how I knew he wasn't like the others." Cole didn't answer. He just listened. For the first time, someone was painting a picture of his father. Not a myth, not a name, but a man. "What was his name?" he asked. Mabel took a long breath before she said, "Ezekiel Booker." And the name cut through the night like thunder. Ezekiel Booker. The man who vanished before Cole was born. The man no one ever spoke of. Cole repeated the name quietly, letting it settle in his chest. "He was brave," Mabel continued. but too trusting. He believed the war was over, that they could ride free, start something honest. But the land didn't forgive, and neither did the men who ran it. Cole stared into the fire, fists tight. All these years, he thought his father was a ghost. But now, the ghost had a voice, and a grave that waited in silence. The next morning, they rode through a valley littered with abandoned mining carts. The ground was scarred from old battles, not of war, but of greed. They killed him over land, Mabel said bitterly. Him and my husband both. Shot 'em like animals. Left 'em for the vultures. Cole's stomach turned. He'd always feared his father died running. Died weak. But now he saw it clearly. He'd died fighting. Died with honor. Died for something the world refused to let him have. And nobody came to claim his bones, until now. That night, the moon was red and full. Coyotes cried in the distance, and the fire crackled low. Mabel handed Cole an old compass. He gave this to my husband before they went out. Told him to give it to his boy if anything happened. Cole took it with trembling fingers. The brass was cold, but it burned in his palm. It wasn't just a tool. It was proof. Proof his father thought of him, planned for him, hoped for him. And though the trail still stretched ahead, Cole already felt closer to the man whose blood flowed in his veins. By dawn, the map had nearly torn in two from handling, but Cole knew every bend by memory now. Mabel's directions matched the terrain like a puzzle finally coming together. Cactus Ridge loomed in the distance, jagged, red, and ancient, like the land itself was watching them. Cole's horse slowed as the ground grew rockier, and the trail narrowed to a ledge just wide enough for one rider at a time. Mabel didn't hesitate. She rode with a determination that made her seem younger. Like this wasn't just a mission, it was penance. They passed a twisted tree split by lightning, its charred bark black against the sun. Mabel stopped, pulled a folded piece of cloth from her satchel, and tied it around a low branch. "This is where it started," she whispered. "They met here. Thought they were safe. Thought no one would follow them this far." Cole looked around. The stillness was heavy. Like the land itself remembered the blood it drank. "Did you see it happen?" he asked. Mabel nodded. "I saw enough." Her voice cracked, and she didn't say more. Further ahead, they found what remained of an old wagon. Just the rusted frame and two cracked wheels half buried in the dirt. Mabel dismounted and knelt beside it, brushing dust off something buried. A bullet casing. Still there after all those years. "This was theirs," she said. "They were ambushed at dawn. 7 men against 2. Cole clenched his teeth. "And nobody came to help?" Mabel shook her head. "No law out here. Just death and silence." Her fingers trembled as she stood again, and for the first time, Cole saw the weight she'd carried all these years. That night, they didn't make a fire. Mabel said they were close, and the ground deserved quiet. They laid under the stars, sky clear and wide above them. Cole stared up, thoughts racing. What kind of man was Ezekiel Booker? What dreams had he carried before they were cut down? He closed his eyes and tried to imagine the face, the voice, the presence of a man who had passed everything to him except the chance to meet. And yet, somehow, that absence had shaped Cole more than any living mentor ever could. At sunrise, they reached the ridge. The map ended at a small plateau, surrounded by cactus and rock, as if the desert had built a wall to guard what lay there. Mabel got off her horse, slow and stiff. "It's here," she said. "I buried them myself." She pointed to a flat patch of ground marked only by a small pile of stones. "No names. No markers. I didn't want the wrong people finding them." Cole dismounted, walking toward the stones like approaching a sleeping lion. Each step felt heavier than the last. He stood before the grave, simple, unmarked, but real. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. The silence was deafening. The desert held its breath with him. Then he knelt, laid a hand on the stones, and whispered, "I found you." His voice cracked, but he didn't cry. He just stared. For the first time in his life, the void inside him had a name, a place, a resting point. This wasn't just a grave. It was an anchor. A final chapter to a book he'd carried half-written for too long. Mabel watched him from a few paces back, her hands folded, eyes wet but proud. "He talked about you," she said softly. "Said if he didn't make it back, he hoped you'd grow up free. Free to ride. Free to choose." Cole looked up. "He knew about me?" Mabel nodded. "He saw your mother before he left. Knew she was pregnant. That's why he wanted land. He was going to build something. Something no one could take from you." The wind picked up, swirling dust across the stones, like the land was listening. Cole reached into his coat and pulled out the compass, the one Mabel had given him. He set it gently on the grave, pressing it into the dirt. "This belongs here," he said. "It brought me to him." Mabel smiled, though it trembled. "He'd be proud of you. You're the kind of man he wanted to be." Cole didn't reply. He couldn't. Pride wasn't something he wore well. But in that moment, he felt it, not as praise, but as legacy. Not a compliment, but a burden carried with honor. They spent the rest of the day in silence, clearing the area, placing stones in a circle, and carving initials into a flat piece of iron they found near the wagon. E.B. and H.C., Ezekiel Booker and Henry Carson. The two men who died trying to build peace in a land that didn't want it. When they finished, Cole stood up straight, staring at the names. "Now they're not forgotten," he said. And for the first time, his voice didn't sound alone. It sounded rooted, like it came from generations behind him. As the sun dipped behind the ridge, casting the whole plateau in gold, Mabel placed a hand on Cole's shoulder. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "But I needed to see this finished." Cole looked at her and nodded. "Then let's finish it." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small wooden cross. He'd carved it back when he was 16, the only thing he'd ever made with his father in mind. Now it stood firm, buried in the dust beside the stones. The last piece of a story that refused to stay buried. As night fell over the desert, the stars returned brighter than ever, like the sky was wide open now that the truth had surfaced. Cole and Mabel camped one last time near the grave, the fire crackling low as coyotes howled in the distance. Mabel took a sip from her canteen and said quietly, "This land remembers everything. The good, the evil, the silence." Cole nodded. "And now, it remembers him." Neither of them spoke for a while. No words felt big enough for what they had uncovered, nor necessary. The next morning, they broke camp early. Cole saddled his horse slowly, turning back to the small grave site with every step. He wasn't ready to leave, but he knew staying wouldn't bring the man back. What mattered was that he found him, and honored him. Mabel rode ahead, giving him space. As he mounted, Cole said one final thing under his breath, "I'll carry it forward." The wind answered with a whisper, and it felt like a voice, faint but real, saying, "Good." They rode in silence for hours, retracing the trail through ridges and dusty bends. But the journey back felt different, lighter, like the land had shifted under their feet. Mabel's face was calmer, her eyes softer. Cole glanced over. "You gonna tell the town?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Let 'em wonder. I did what needed doing." Cole chuckled. "You always were braver than you looked." Mabel snorted. "Don't let the gray hair fool you." And for the first time since they met, they laughed. Back in town, things hadn't changed much. Dust still danced in the streets. Folks still watched Cole from behind their curtains. But something had changed in him. He wasn't just the black rancher they feared anymore. He was a man who had looked history in the eye and survived it. At the saloon, silence fell when he entered. Mabel walked right behind him, holding the map in her hand like a warning or a promise. Cole sat down at the counter. Whiskey. Neat. The bartender didn't argue. Whispers started. He went into the hills. Did you see him ride with that widow? They say he found something buried. Cole didn't react. He let the noise buzz around him like flies, meaningless and passing. The only thing that mattered was what he carried now. Truth, pain, legacy. And maybe something even more dangerous. Peace. Mabel leaned close. You should write it down someday. Cole shook his head. Stories like this don't belong on paper. They belong in the dirt. That's where the truth lives. Outside the saloon, a young boy watched them from across the street. Barefoot, dusty, eyes wide with curiosity. Cole caught his stare and gave a small nod. The boy nodded back. A silent moment passed between them. Recognition, maybe even hope. Mabel saw it too. He reminds me of you, she said. Cole didn't answer, but he knew what she meant. Maybe now, the next generation wouldn't have to dig through blood and silence to find their roots. Maybe someone had already cleared the path. The next few days passed quietly. Cole returned to his ranch, cleaned the dust off the old compass he'd left behind, and placed it in a box beside a worn photograph of his mother. Mabel returned to her small cottage on the edge of town, where the map once lived hidden behind floorboards. Neither of them needed to speak. The story had finished itself. But in that silence, something new was growing, a quiet knowing that they had changed something, even if the world didn't know it. One afternoon, Cole saddled his horse again, not to chase the past, but to ride into his own future. The ranch wasn't just land anymore. It was history, memory, inheritance. He rode the edge of his property, tipped his hat to the wind, and whispered, I'm still here. The land answered with birdsong and breeze. Not much had changed in the world outside, but inside Cole Booker, everything was different. He was no longer the son of a ghost. He was the heir of a man. And though no one carved it into stone or wrote it in books, the desert would remember. The wind would carry the tale of the black rancher who rode with a widow into the wild, found his father's grave, and laid the ghosts to rest. No gunfights. No gold. Just truth. Hard-earned and deeply buried. A truth that couldn't be stolen or forgotten, because it lived now in the hands of the living, in the saddle of a man who carried legacy with silence and honor. So if you've watched this story to the very end, it means you believe, like we do, that some stories are worth unearthing, no matter how long they've been buried. Before you go, do one simple thing. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a true tale from the heart of the frontier. These stories aren't just about the West. They're about all of us, the roots we come from, and the truths we choose to carry. Until next time, ride true and stay wild.